Hello, I'm Joan Landis. Glad to be with you again. One of the important things about relationships is that we have to have good boundaries in order to have healthy relationships. What does that mean? When I'm working with clients, I often need to do lots of boundary work with them because many people have really bad boundaries, okay? So let's talk about what a boundary is in a relationship. It basically is the expectation that certain things will be honored in the relationship, and these are usually fairly normal expectations that people have. So if people demand too much of your time, too much of your financial resources, too much of your emotional resources, and they make unreasonable requests of you, or in fact don't even make requests, they just assume, and they do lots of boundary crossing with maybe your home or your time or your property or anything like that. So somebody that borrows things without asking, somebody that just assumes that you're going to do something for them without asking, takes you for granted, makes unreasonable demands. Those are all boundary issues that people who want healthy relationships usually have very, very good boundaries. And what that means is that you simply will not allow certain types of behavior to happen on your watch, okay? And people with bad boundaries really are kind of, Dorothy Doormat. And they get stepped on all the time, and then they feel terrible about themselves and they can't figure out why. Well, part of it is because if you have lousy boundaries, you are going to feel really disempowered and taken advantage of. So when I teach my clients about boundaries, I point out to them that boundaries are very, very useful and healthy. So it's an interesting scientific fact that dairy cows, if they have bad fences around them, they will test those fences, they'll hook them with their horns, they'll push on them, they'll lean on them. And what happens if the fences around them are weak? That those dairy cows will kind of become obsessed with pushing those boundaries. And they'll keep walking around testing. Well, the crazy thing is, when they're busy testing those boundaries, they simply cannot relax, and they actually produce less milk, right? And so a good dairy owner knows that one of the best things they can do to help that cow to relax and do what it's supposed to do, produce milk, that the dairy owner will create good fences around the herd of cattle, that the cows can finally relax and lay down, chew their cud, and produce sometimes twice as much milk. Isn't that crazy? And it's almost as if the cow thinks that if the fence isn't strong enough to keep me in, maybe it's not strong enough to keep the wolves out, And they get worried and they keep testing and testing. Well, people are kind of the same way, okay? So if we have bad boundaries, if we don't have clear expectations and clear boundaries, then people will keep pushing. They'll keep pushing on those boundaries, pushing. They'll some people will keep pushing till they find out where you finally say, that's it, no more. But sometimes people are hesitant to have good, firm boundaries. They're like, the way boundaries were my family, it was kind of scary and mean, but boundaries were like, get out of my car, or, something like that. It sounded scary and mean, or get off my property. Ugh, who wants to be like that, right? And so some people see that and they're like, I don't want to be that way, so I'll be Dorothy Doormat, and I'll just let anybody do what they want and assume I'm going to do whatever for them, and my needs are worth nothing, and the only thing that is important is their needs and their schedule and their emergencies. So the interesting thing is that there is some good research that shows that people with good boundaries actually are more compassionate than people who have bad boundaries. Now, why is that? Because it seems like to set up good firm boundaries, you might have to be like maybe mean. I don't know. It's like that's how it feels to people. I don't want to be mean, so I guess I won't have good boundaries. But what happens is if we don't have good boundaries and people keep violating our boundaries, the stress that it puts us under and the frustration, some of the anger, some of the depression, some of the helplessness that we feel, that actually translates into non-compassion. We simply can't be compassionate when we're feeling hurt, disempowered, helpless, angry, right? So that's why people with good boundaries can actually be much more compassionate within that boundary, right? Than people who have rotten boundaries and people are always coming in uninvited. So, so what do your boundaries have to look like? Do they have to look like electrified fence with razor wire on the top? Or can they be like a picket fence with pretty flowers on the front? Or is it a chain link fence? I don't know what your boundaries need to be like with different people. You may have to have different types of boundaries. Some people are notoriously bad about being boundary violators. They have such bad perception of boundaries. They don't even understand what they're doing. They're imposing on you or they're violating your boundaries and they don't even get it. So they're a little bit unaware of how boundaries work. And so for those people, your boundaries may need to look like a chain link fence, right? It's like pretty firm, pretty high, it's pretty clear. People who are literally dangerous, okay? So if somebody's sexually abusing your child, somebody's physically abusive to you, somebody's stealing from you. So your boundaries may need to be really high, maybe some barbed wire on the top, okay? We're not kidding, we got a wall here. And that's entirely appropriate if something is actually dangerous. But other people, they get it. It doesn't take much to communicate to them, I'm really not comfortable with that. That really doesn't work for me. And so your boundaries with them can be like this cute little white picket fence with the flowers and everything, and they get it. They're not going to jump over. That's just all they need to know is where it is. So when you think about doing boundaries, you have to kind of consider the person you're dealing with, okay? You're not going to have the same type of boundaries for every person. And that's a useful thing to know. And that's okay. That's actually entirely appropriate. And so one of the ways that you do boundaries is you can set up the expectations beforehand, So if people want to, take you, have you babysit, okay? Someone wants to have you babysit. That at the outset, you say, hey, I've got at 4 o'clock I need to be done, and so I need you to be here by 4. And so you just have that expectation at the outset. Or say your husband wants to go buy a new car and you've looked at the budget and you're like, okay, darling, I'm just telling you that, we really cannot spend more than $15,000 on a car. Are you good with that? That's where it feels comfortable for me. And then if he agrees to it, great. The expectation is there. So setting up expectations ahead of time is a really great strategy. Try to think it through. What are some things that could happen? Is this person you're dealing with a notorious boundary violator, or are they pretty respectful of your boundaries? So that's really good. But what if somebody actually violates your boundary? You're feeling, you're not in your best place. You're feeling like that was inappropriate and I really need to nip that in the bud. I really need to stop that because that's not my idea of a healthy relationship, for them to feel like they can do that and not understand that that doesn't work for me. And so when you have, when you're establishing boundaries, you want to do it in a way that's very clear and telling what's not going to work, what doesn't work for you, and possibly even some consequences. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, about how to do healthy boundaries, but just have that concept in mind that having healthy boundaries is a good thing. It's not mean. It's actually the nicest thing you can do, because then with healthy boundaries within that, you can be your compassionate, loving self. So have fun this week. And, for an action item, maybe look around and identify people that you need to have really high boundaries with and some that you can just have little gentle boundaries. Just start noticing who violates your boundaries and who doesn't, who makes you uncomfortable, without kind of owning what they've done. And And just kind of notice that, and then we'll get back to and work on this some more. So it's been great being with you. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.